Hello, everyone. My name is Lila, and I will be presenting the paper, a computational network model for shared mental models in hospital operation rooms. And this work has been done by myself, Professor Jan Treur, Jan Klein, and Peter Roelofsma. I'll first quickly go over what I'm discussing in this presentation. So we kind of are combining two domains, like an approach and a domain. We are using the computational network modeling approach that is developed by Jan Treur, and we are applying this to the domain of intubation, the intubation procedure, which is normally done by a doctor and a nurse, or possibly more medical personnel. So I'll first quickly go over what the domain looks like. So most of you probably have seen this in like a movie or something, but when a patient cannot breathe well, he or she needs to be intubated, and there are multiple ways to intubate. The one with the tube that you're seeing in the picture in my slides, it's called laryngoscopy, and there is also intubations where there's a cut made in the neck of the patient, but that's, for example, if this one doesn't work. So our scenario is that a doctor, denoted by D, is called to perform a tracheal intubation, which is the one with the tube that you're seeing, in collaboration with a nurse, denoted with the N. So we can divide the operation in a few roles for the doctor and a nurse. So the doctor's roles are the team leader, being the team leader, preparing the team for difficulties, and being the intubator. And the nurse has as her or his roles intubator assistant, preparing the patient, preparing the equipment, preparing the drugs, and then also giving the drugs before the procedure, monitoring the patient, and then giving cricoid force, which is a kind of pressure on the throat of the patient so that the doctor can see in the mouth and can put the tube in, and if necessary, running for help and running for equipment. So together, these roles form a shared mental model because there's more than one person that has a mental model about has roles, and they're basically having a shared mental model both about their own and the other person's roles. Yeah, so these are the roles, and now we will go over the steps of the intubation procedure. So let's say a patient comes in that needs to be intubated, and imagine the situation is quite stressful because the patient cannot breathe. So first, the nurse prepares. So these steps, by the way, are from like medical literature, and this is kind of how an intubation should go by the book. So step one, the nurse prepares the patient and performs the preparation of the equipment. This includes the so-called capnograph that we will see later on in steps as well. Then the nurse performs the preparation of the drugs. After this, the doctor starts with the pre-oxygenation of the patient. This means that the patient gets an oxygen mask on. Then the doctor starts with the preparation of the team and the preparation for difficulties. So the doctor will be saying to the team what they're going to be doing, and if something goes wrong, what they will be doing then. The nurse gives the patient the prepared drugs as the next step, and then the nurse starts performing the cricoid force. Then the doctor initiates the executing of Plan A laryngoscopy, which was the intubation that we saw in the picture before. And the doctor kind of announces here that they're starting that. Then the doctor actually starts the first intubation attempt, and the nurse assists the doctor in the intubation attempt. And then the nurse monitors the patient. And when the first attempt is finished, the nurse seeks confirmation of the attempt's success or not by monitoring the capnograph, which the nurse prepared in step one. if the Kaplan graph shows that the attempt has succeeded, then the nurse will verbalize this to the doctor, and the doctor will also verbalize that it has succeeded. So there's like a lot of communication going on here. Okay, so as I said, we are applying the domain to our network modeling approach. So this is the network model. This is like a bigger overview, and you can kind of divide it in three parts: the red, the yellow, and the blue. So first of all, the blue is what is actually happening in the world. So you can see, let me go a bit closer. You can see WS for the blue, which means world state, so what is happening in the world. So all this whole line of blue dots is kind of all the steps that we discussed in the previous slide. So the steps that have to happen for an intubation. So you see in the beginning it says call intub. They're all a bit shortened, so it would fit better. So call for intubation. The next one is prep PN. So that means prepare patient by the nurse. And then prep EC N. So that means prepare equipment by the nurse, and so forth. I won't go over all of them now. So that's like that middle blue part. And that means that these things are actually happening in the world. On top, you see that red circled part. So the circled part is what is happening in the mental model of the doctor. So these steps are virtually the same as the steps in the world states, but they happen in the head of the doctor. So you kind of see the same steps, and you see that it's denoted by DS, so doctor states. And then on the bottom part, you see NS states in the yellow part, and also the circle part is what is happening in the mental model of the nurse. So they're all pretty similar. However, the difference is in those little lighter colored yellow and red circles. These are the ownership states. So as you can see here, OS2 prep PN. These ownership states are the states that kind of make things actually happen. So they only exist for the steps of the nurse and the doctor for the actions that each of them actually has to do. So here it's easy to see kind of the sequence of who's doing what and when. So there's a bit of gaps in there. You see that the nurse is like preparing the patient, the equipment and the drugs, and then the doctor takes over with the pre-oxygenation and team and the difficulties, etc. So you can see it's quite complicated to have this all go smoothly under a stressful situation. And that each of them is actually doing what they're supposed to do and taking over from the other when they're done. In all the way on the right, you see like a bit more states, and that I'll actually zoom in again. So you see that after WS13 over here, observing the Kaplan graph, the nurse actually has to say if the attempt has succeeded, verbalizing success by the nurse, or failed. And this then also goes on for the doctor if they're verbalizing for success or failure. These come from the ownership states that also have dotted negative influence lines. So verbalize failure ownership states from the nurse will negatively influence the verbalization, hard word to say, for success for the nurse. So this is kind of how all these things work. Then I'll just quickly go over our context state over here. That's basically right now that's working as stress. So here you can see the whole thing. It is connected to the verbalization of the failure and the success of the nurse. The higher the stress, the higher the influence on the verbalization of the failure. So that means that this kind of shows whether the attempt has succeeded or failed. And currently this is not really dynamic. We can just kind of turn on if it fails or not. Finally, I'll just kind of quickly go over the simulation examples. So the above domain model that I just introduced was then formalized using the approach that Jan Keur developed, and then put into a dedicated software environment in MATLAB. And then we could easily make these simulations with it, and you can kind of play with all the parameters. And as you saw in the model, we have all these like gaps between who's doing what and when. So it gets pretty complicated. And it's great to be able to like tune the parameters and see what works best for the model to run smoothly. So this is showing the world states. So the activation means that the state is actually happening. So for example, a call for intubation is starting on top. And then this kind of puts into motion all the other states in the model. So as you can see by this WS17 that is happening around timestamp 50, the verbalization of the success by the doctor is activated. So that means that this is a successful attempt. I'll quickly just continue to the doctor one. So we also have the nurse, but we're running a bit out of time. So as you can see for the doctor, the ownership states for the doctor, the dotted lines are being activated, meaning that the doctor is doing his or her tasks. And some of them are not being activated, and these are actually the failed attempt ones. So also here, the verbalization of the success by the doctor is being activated, which is this thick brown line. And then the nurse has very similar ones. I'm just going to go over it quickly because our time is up. So just to quickly summarize, we made a computational network model for simulation of tracheal intubation. And in simulation experiments in the paper, both successful and failed attempts were addressed. Next steps will be multiple intubation attempts, allowing for adaptivity by the doctor and the nurse, and possibly having a bigger team size for this project. All right, thank you for listening.